Well, this was a difficult video to make, and not because some technical difficulties with my camera or recording or audio or editing or something like that, but because this was an emotional journey. I spent a lot of time disassembling this in hopes that I would kind of connect with it a little bit more than if I just popped open an RTR and taking it out. Taking it out and actually running it and trying to figure out how to actually connect this thing to the ground, get the power down, get it to go straight, stop from having all these crashes, breaking parts, things of that nature. There was a point where I was just like, okay, I'm not into speed runs maybe. But then it started to break for me a little bit, and I started to get it, and it started to connect, and it started to get some speeds going. And even though I'm not posting some huge triple-digit numbers with this, I did set some PBs, and feeling much better about it. Hello, and welcome to Quiet RC. As usual, I'm Rob. Today, we're finally back to talking about the Rlaarlo AK-917. And yes, I did actually get some clean runs in. Obviously not with this particular body. This is for the shelf. So at the time of recording this particular portion of the video, Rlaarlo has actually just announced that they are going to be releasing another 1/10 scale speedrun car. And the big selling point of this one is that it has the capability of having a dual motor mount put in it. Now, still waiting to find out if you can actually use a dual motor mount in the AK-917. However, the one that's coming out is actually modeled off of the Mazda 787B Le Mans winner from the 90s. Which is super cool. And obviously they rip off the livery and everything like that. Either way, looks great. When I went to go to put this all back together, one thing I did was I decided to leave off a bunch of stuff. So the fake brake calipers, the fake tail lights and lights and everything like that, took all that stuff out. Just kind of trying to get rid of some of the weight. First thing I built back up were the differentials. As mentioned, I am locking them down. I used just some really thick silicone, this ear protection stuff. I put that in the diffs and that pretty much all but locked them down completely. Obviously, I don't care about turning performance when I'm doing this. As I was reassembling them, I did make sure that I was checking to get the right direction because it's super easy to put them in backwards and then you'd have the wheel spinning the other way. Obviously don't want that. I don't really like how the front upper suspension arms are put together because you have to do a combination of putting the kind of set screw in just the right place. I was really trying to get kind of a 0 degrees of camber because I just wanted the wheels just nice and straight up and down, and I actually don't think I fully achieved that yet because it's not like a turnbuckle where you can adjust it. There are turnbuckles in the rear and you can adjust it there and get those straight up and down. When I ordered the kit, the motor mount that it actually comes with didn't allow you to actually set up the highest gearing you could possibly do with the stuff that they give you, both pinion and I believe it's a 52 tooth spur gear. I think they might now come with this upgraded adjustable motor mount because I believe they kind of realized that like, oh, you can't even set it up with the gearing that we provide you in your kit. So I did order that separately because I ordered this when it first came out. I pre-ordered it. I had to pay for the motor mount extra. Again, I'm not entirely sure if they now include that upgraded motor mount, but it allows you to actually slide it back and forth. It makes adjusting the motor much easier for the pinion and spur gear changes that you're doing. I do plan on converting this to a Mod 1, which has bigger teeth. In the future, it'll make setting up gearing a lot easier, I believe. However, I haven't fully figured out how to do that yet. One of the other journeys that went on with this was getting the actual battery tie downs the way I wanted to. They include like a plastic strap that goes across the top and it just fits a very specific size battery. Now, I knew that I was going to be stepping up from 2S to 3S and eventually 4S. And because I don't actually have an actual 4S battery, I knew that I was going to actually be connecting to 2S batteries. So there was going to be a lot of size changes going on. And so I needed something that, for a battery mount purpose, was very versatile. Finally hunted down the correct thing that I wanted, which was actually the scorched parts battery tie downs. And it took also a while to find the correct length straps. I think I eventually ordered 3 different length straps to get the Velcro straps, to get those to actually hold the battery in place how I wanted it to. I also did put down some of the kind of that 3M hook and loop, but it's not really hook and loop. It's like the kind of aggressive Velcro, if you will. And that helps to keep everything in place. As far as electrics go, I'm using the Mamba X ESC, and I am using a 2100 kV, the 1412 from Castle Motors. And I believe I'm going to step that up at some point. I'm going to probably get one that has the 5mm motor shaft on it versus the 3 point whatever it is millimeter shaft on it, and that'll allow me some more options with gearing. And lastly, I put the radio link system in there, and specifically the receiver that I have in here is the dual antenna R7FG, and that one is the one with the gyro, and I'll get a little bit into that and my journey with the gyro. Comparing this to my touring car that I actually race, my Schumacher Mi8, which I've done a video on, this is, I think, almost 60% heavier. Obviously, it's a completely different application that they're trying to fill here, but I just thought it was wild how much heavier this was just without any batteries in it or anything like that compared to the Mi8. I mean, the Mi8 is just a featherweight comparatively. The suspension as it comes is actually set up really high. Like the ride height is really high, especially when you're going to put on foams that you're going to be using for the actual speed runs. It sits up very high. I first tried to use some plastic spacers that I had inside the shock bodies to shorten that suspension travel to get it close to the ground, but didn't really like how that worked out. I eventually went with the trick where you use fuel tubing because it has a little bit of rebound to it, so it's not so abrupt. And I put 5mm in each shock, and it lowered it a bit. I think I could even go lower, but at some point it becomes difficult to reassemble the shock spring holders on the suspension. So I'm still not entirely sure where I am on that. Now, I was able to do runs, so maybe I don't need to worry about it as much. However, I am going to get some stiffer springs because it still has a lot of suspension travel where you don't really want that. The place where I have found to run it is so smooth that I may even go with, at least in the rear, the kind of solid setup where you just use turnbuckles in place of the suspension, so it just holds it stiff, because I don't really need that much or any suspension travel for these speed runs. And you don't want the back starting to squat down at speed, air gets under the front, and then you're up and out.
Here we go. Oh my God, oh my God.
Speaking of finding places to run, I was having trouble settling on finding an actual nice long strip of road that wasn't very traveled and at the same time was smooth. And as I was kind of going around Google Earth and searching around the Indianapolis area, I noticed just this really long strip of what looked like black tarmac, and zoomed in on Earth, and it was a soapbox track. So there's actually a Soapbox Derby run on the, I guess it'd be kind of the northwestern side of Indianapolis, which is kind of far from me, about 30 minutes. I went over there, and looking at it, it seemed like the perfect place to run, but ultimately I don't think it was very good. I thought it would be nice to have the guardrails on either side to keep the car from flipping off into oblivion, but really that just created a very hard surface for the car to slam into. And also the surface wasn't great for 2 reasons. I think it was kind of a little too slick and I couldn't really get the car to hook up. Now, there's some other issues that I was having that may have been the cause of that, but also there were trees around it. And so I would go there, and one time I even took my leaf blower with me and blew off the whole run, and still would get leaves and acorns and stuff like that stuck underneath the front of the car. I eventually found what amounts to an access road that had so recently been paved that the construction signs saying that there was fresh oil on it were still up. It's near like a municipal airport, so, and it's, you know, back off in some in like industrial, commercial area, whatever. So the entire time I've spent there, which is in total maybe about an hour and a half, I've probably seen 3 or 4 cars the whole time. So it was a really good spot to go and do some of these runs. I want to talk really quickly before I get into the runs about the body you see before you. This is the body that comes with the kits, or one of the options. This is their Porsche Golf livery inspired paint job that they did for you. This is the Pink Pig inspired livery that I've done here from the original Porsche 917s. The decals themselves, I'm not even entirely sure what original kit they came with, but these are from MCI Racing, which I've used a bunch of times. I love their decals. It's fun to have all these available to you. And this was just really kind of piecing it together because it wasn't from a 917 kit. It wasn't originally for a real 917. So I just kind of pieced it together, and I love the way it turned out. The color I used was Mission Models. I believe it was like Pearl Berry. And when you back it with silver and then white, it comes out a little bit more pink than kind of a berry color. So that's how I ended up here. I did actually put the lights back on this one, whereas with this car, I just don't have the lights on at all. So let's get into some of the runs. As I mentioned, the runs on the Soapbox Derby track were not great. They had some what kind of looked like fairly benign crashes, but they ended up causing decent amount of damage. And I don't blame that on the car actually, because it's a really robust car, and over at the other area that I was running had some pretty bad crashes, flipping, everything like that, and it held together pretty well. So, and the other thing that I also want to touch on. All right, so I'm in the middle of just finishing up editing this video, and I wanted to cut in here because there was something that I was thinking about that I forgot to talk about earlier, and that is Rlaarlo parts availability, at least for the 917. Right now, all you can do is go to their website and order it directly from them. Up until recently, it was definitely coming from China, where they're based, and I just noticed the new shock tower that I ordered seemed to originate just outside of New York City. New York City! So I don't know if they've found more of a local parts distributor, but as of right now, to the best of my knowledge, there's no kind of regular retailer you can order from, and that does present a problem because you kind of have to wait like 2 weeks every time you break something. But maybe this new shipment that I just ordered a couple days ago will come more quickly. But it'd be nice if they could get some more local parts distribution. Is some of the stuff you can buy for your speed runs that you maybe need to pay attention to. And I'm gonna speak directly about wheels and tires. I actually had a really hard time, mostly just because of my ignorance, finding the right wheels and tires for this. The kit comes with, I believe they might be belted or not, but they at least offer belted tires as an upgrade, but they're rubber. And I found out you really don't use rubber tires for speed runs, especially when you're getting up into the higher numbers. You're using foams. Big reason for that is weight. Foam is a lot lighter. It does provide good traction, but really it's about the weight. These are just kind of gonna be for the shelf, as is this body. And the first set of foams that I bought were inexpensive ones off of eBay, just because I wasn't sure what I was doing and I didn't want to spend a lot of money, but the old adage, buy once, cry once kind of thing. And what happened is, because these are inexpensive, they are built not only cheaply, but they use the wrong kind of wheel. And what they should be using is something that doesn't have, these are wheels that are really designed for rubber tires, because the rubber tires will have the lips that sit in here and need to be glued. Whereas with a foam, it's just a flat piece. So this should be flat. And so when it comes down to it, all that's glued on is just the very edge right here, and the rest of it's not glued on. At a not a very high speed and a very low impact, this just kind of imploded. The second set of tires I bought were from Contact. This one damaged because of my poor driving. If you actually look at it, it is flat across here. So it is glued all the way across here. The tires that I ultimately ended up doing my speed runs were BSR drag carbon. The way I found out how to use those was I commented on a recent video by Raz Shifrin out of Israel, who does a lot of speed runs, and he's done a couple with the Rlaarlo. So on one of his videos, I said, hey, I'm having trouble finding tires. What are you using? And he replied. He said, BSR drag carbons. So that's what I got, and that's how I got my PBs. Speaking of where I got the PBs, was on that airport access road. And that's where I actually had a lot of success of actually getting this back and forth. First couple tries there, I was getting better speeds, but I was still having a really hard time controlling it. You'll see that I had some accidents here. You know, it kind of flipped off into the soybean fields or did all of its rolling right on the pavement. The second time I went back, I finally gave in and said, okay, maybe I need to use the gyro, because in my mind, I was like, oh, that's for drifting or whatever. And again, back to the Raz Schifrin videos, the speed run stuff, he was using it. I mean, he's hitting 200 miles an hour and he's using a gyro. So there must be something to that. The Radio Link radio that I have has its own integrated gyro. So I'm not using a separate gyro. It has its own integrated gyro into the receiver. You go through the setup process for that. I'm not gonna really get into that here because obviously every radio is different, but I was able to dial it up and down, and a few tries I got to the correct amount of interference from the gyro that was helping me. Really, when it comes down to it, the video of my successful personal bests are pretty boring because all it is just a car going by fast in a straight line. But that's where my hands were shaking. I was finally getting it full throttle. I was holding full throttle.
Okay, man, let's turn and burn.
For a length of time, knowing that I was actually getting the motor to fully wind up and getting all that power down to the ground. So the real moral of the story is that the most simple, uninteresting looking video that I have here are the times where I actually started to enjoy chasing these speed runs. So that's where I'm gonna end it, is it took me a long time to get to the point where I was enjoying this, and I wasn't enjoying it for a long time, but I just kind of kept pushing through, trying to learning more things, getting back to it. I am gonna keep pushing more with this. I don't know if I'll do another video on it or not. Please go check out my previous video on tearing down the AK-917. It is interesting to see how it's all come together. And of course, please subscribe, please like if you're into some of these videos. I have a bunch more stuff coming up here. So until next time, we'll talk RC again later. Thank you.
That was close. Wow.